Hello, friends. Host Eric here, host Talking with Famous People. And today I'm in the room with Opaloid, Sauce, and Susie. And I'm very interested in having a conversation about the recent conflicts between me and Sauce over basically TIFI. So I've asked, they were both, now I should give a heads up. Opaloid is knackered, and Sauce is hungover. So the, I had to talk them both into this a little bit. I had to cajole them. I had to bring a little, hey, you guys, you know. Uh, so anyway, but the reason I've been thinking about it a lot, I don't like fighting with Sauce. For some reason, it makes my spirit feel bruised. Um, Sauce, how did you enjoy those fights that we had?
Well, I didn't really view it so much as fights, as more just sort of um, misunderstanding, but kind of, uh, I mean, to be perfectly frank, I guess, like, I'm used to kind of you getting riled up about your points and your issues and stuff, so mainly just sort of like riding that out, really, and sort of a little bit guilty of myself for sort of like maybe providing some TE or maybe FI opinions into something that just didn't fit in with theory very well, confusing people and stuff. Because it was very like obvious to me that other TI users were also having input. Saying, well, if you're going to say that, you need to defend your position and stuff. And it's like, you know, at that time, you kind of feel a little bit bombarded by everybody saying, well, there's a lot of stuff all coming at you all at once, and that translates at least the perception of it into your position isn't valid. You know what I mean? And like it can be quite dominating to be, or you know have everybody kind of like all eyes turned on you, telling you must kind of provide this thing, or provide this specific standpoint to be argued against and all of that sort of stuff. Uh, so there was an element of that to it, I guess.
I see. The thing is, I think one of the differences between the TI user, FI user paradigms are that the TI basically says some positions definitely aren't valid, but FI users tend to say positions are expressions of individuals and all individuals are valid. So I think that's basically what happens when TI and FI conflict is the TI user wants to use a disinterested calculus and the FI user says calculi are always interested. And both are true. It's important to use a disinterested calculus sometimes, and it's also true that it's always a an inadequate approximation of the individual's unique experience, and it inadequately values the particular individual on some level.
Mm.
So, I mean, I don't ultimately find TI and FI inherently at odds. Like, I think we're on the same
No.
team. The introverted, the those of us who have introverted judging functions above extroverted judging functions are on the same team.
Yeah. Do you remember when I was explaining to you a little bit afterwards, kind of from my opinion, what was happening? And I was saying that, I'm not really that interested in kind of trying to, you know, put forward any TI stuff. I realize I'm TI polar. Like, it might not appear that way, maybe to other people, because I seem maybe like I can hold my own. I've been told that some people said yes, some people said no, but whatever the perception is. But the thing about that is that I'm quite well aware that I'm not able to do that back and forth, and kind of try and challenge your assertion on that level. So what I often try and do is uh, take it into the realm of TE or maybe FI, something where I'm more comfortable in. So I'll go, okay, so this is what you're proposing. I hear you. So let's apply this to the real world, and then see what would happen. But like as a result of applying your theory to what we know of the world as it stands now. Or we can add some caveats, or we could roll back time and put it in on feudal age England or wherever. Let's look at the real world repercussions of what you're proposing here, because this is where I can do my work. You know what I mean? So I think what happened there was a divergence from, or maybe a misunderstanding, of, like, it wasn't like, it wasn't kind of criticizing the construct that was created, or your theory. It was more sort of like trying to push it into sort of like, let's explore what would happen, let's TE this, really, I think is probably what was going on there from my perspective, or at least that's what I've thought about it anyway.
Okay, well, let's look at the determinism argument. What I determined, like the next day, is I could easily enough have provided a this something like this. Okay, so I get what you're saying. You don't want to define free will, and that's fine. And yet we can still sort of talk about it in the following capacity. While we don't necessarily we're not necessarily going to be able to agree on a definition of free will, what we both could probably agree upon is that people behave more or less freely in different circumstances. So if
Mhm.
if somebody is very reflexive in their responses to everything, in other words, locked into their default function stack basically, and not metacogniting at all about how they attend to the world, then they're less free. If they're more mindful and more attentionally open to modalities that aren't native to them, then they're more free. And so, in that capacity,
And I don't know if I would.
go ahead. Sorry.
So I don't. Yeah, I don't know if I'd necessarily agree with that as a definition of free will from my perspective.
Well, it's not a
I
definition. That's
mean,
what I'm saying. It's a way to avoid a definition. It's to say that
yeah.
there are varying degrees of freeness, and it's possible to note somebody as less or more free, which suggests that in fact the application of will can be measured on a scale of freeness.
That's cognitively free, though. And enlightened, sort of, in more than sort of or like a demonstration of free will, in my opinion. I mean, even the people who are most closed off and in their own stack, and never looking outwards or upwards, they still have the ability to make decisions that they would call free will.
That's
Uh,
fine. That's fine. What all I'm trying to use this example for, I'm not trying to reignite the determinism discussion, is to point out that
yeah, either am I.
I didn't have to insist on you pinning down a definition in order to talk with you about it. And so, in that regard, that's a TI dishonesty of sorts. It's not expressly deceitful in the sense that it doesn't say anything that's objectively false, but it it approaches the other party oppositionally rather than cooperatively. And TI can do both.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's definitely my observation as well. Is like, I was talking with Audra and Opaloid and stuff later on about. I experience that quite often with the ENTP, or at least, like, let's type aside here, but with Audra and yourself and Mark and some others, and what she was explaining is it can be a little bit like the juice. You know what I mean? You get kind of amped up and you want to just, like, just as I have my own way of understanding the world and everything around me, and you know, it's quite precious to me because it is almost the very essence of me, the way I understand the world and understand everything. As are you, and so, but you're, because of your stack and all the rest of it, it's got more of a TI bent to it. So, you know, you kind of seek that in a way and gain from it in the same way as I would have in kind of deep and meaningful emotional conversations with people, and feeling that we've kind of bridged gaps and pushed boundaries and gained a better understanding and stuff with other people. That kind of, that feeds me a bit, in the same way as I've noticed that ENTP kind of gets fed a little bit by hashing stuff out and making sure that
By
the
negating.
processes and things that they've, yeah,
By
like,
negating.
or kind of, By negating?
Yeah, we parse shit
What do
out
you
and say
mean?
this is why this doesn't withstand scrutiny. That doesn't withstand scrutiny. This doesn't withstand
Mm.
scrutiny. The NTP is by nature negationary. So if no matter what a debate is, an NTP will rather negate the other person's claims than they prefer to make their own claims. That's their default.
But you think that's maybe more on a sort of uh, one level, but then there's another level of like you have your own stuff that you've been thinking about, and you would quite like other people to sort of challenge you on it, so you can test to see if your thinking is correct. Like, because I mean, you know, if the more intelligent you are, the more you're going to realize that you can't know everything and you can't be 100% right all the time, and you're most likely not. Um, you know, so there must be an element of that, right? Like to kind of put out your own kind of theories and stuff to see who can, who's got the chutzpah to kind of break it down if there's any inconsistencies in it, and like,
Sure, but look, that's a
yeah.
more de- matured form of ENTP or INTP that says, okay, I've spent my youth tearing shit down that other people have presented, and now I feel as though I understand the ways to tear shit down enough that I can safely build something.
Mm.
And of course, NTPs do need to evolve beyond simple negationaryism. I'm just saying that people begin life and always continue to sort of prefer uh, one angle of argumentation. Some people prefer argumentation that doesn't have clash at all, which means points are not positioned so that they can contradict each other so that one can be eliminated as acceptable. That's clash, okay? Some people avoid clash by nature, some people seek clash by nature. And seeking clash is a
Hmm.
TI thing. Avoiding
Hmm.
clash is a
Yeah.
TEFI thing.
Yeah, I would like, from my personal experience, I don't claim to speak for anyone else on that, but I definitely feel more in that direction. But maybe Opaloid can weigh in here, because I think he feels similarly to me.
Can you restate your question similarly to you about
Um,
specifically?
well, not wanting clash and wanting to the conversation to be, it can be people can learn, it can be debatary in nature and all the rest of it, but not really wanting clash and high octane sort of negatory stuff.
Yeah, it's strange actually. I'm listening in, and for the viewer, Eric is an ENTP, Source is an ENFP. I'm likely to be an INFJ. So, yeah, what's odd listening to this conversation is I sort of like bridge between the two of you to a certain respect. Um, I'm not also seeking conflict, but I am at the same time seeking understanding. And I see the sort of like conflict or like hashing down to actually understand different points of view may entail that element of conflict, but it's not something that I'm seeking as well at the same time. So it's a bit paradoxical, it's a bit confused.
Clash
Um,
isn't the same as conflict, though. Clash just means that ideas conflict with each other so that one can be eliminated.
hmm. Yeah, and what's interesting about that is when I was listening to this conversation earlier, there's this notion of well, there's a few things actually. One was about NETI, be it an ENTPs or INTPs being negationary, and I've talked to Eric before about whether NEFI, be it in INFPs or ENFPs, is constructive through the use of the FI coupled with the NE. So there's a gluing together as opposed to a breaking apart. The other thing that was also in my mind was linked to temperaments and entities by nature wishing to differentiate, whereas NFs by nature wishing to integrate. So there's all this like mixed bag of stuff that I'm hearing, but I it's hard to describe, but I like the idea of the detached sort of like trying to understand, and that may be a case of shaving off some loose ends to actually have everything neatly and tidily understood. But I can also see from the FI perspective that that may entail a sense of invalidation for the FI user through trying to gain that understanding, and in particular with sources of TI TI polar, but I think it's true in INFPs as well, that trying to get to the nuance of a word or a concept may feel as though it's trying to get to the nuance of a feeling or an authentically held value or belief or whatever it might be, and trying to pass out the two and trying to sort of like say, hey, it's not necessarily about the emotional side of stuff, but it's trying to get to the conceptual understanding or the pattern of it or whatever it might be, is something that I see being demonstrated with Erican's source here. And one other thing, just to throw into the mix very, very quickly before I mute myself again, is to do with attachment and preciousness. So source used the word preciousness. I would say that NTPs and any type, any of the 16 types, has an attachment to the way that they work and what they may relay and what they may hold precious as a result. I think that is true. But sometimes, and this is what's coming to me in this moment, I wonder if sometimes the attachment is not necessarily to the outcome as much as the process. So, for example, one grouping of people may be attached to the outcome and the result of a particular process, and that's where the preciousness actually resides. Whereas another grouping may be actually finding value and worth in the process, irrespective of the outcome. So, for an example, an NTP, ENTP in particular, may value the process irrespective of if the outcome is something which is completely valid or true, but simply the action of going through the motions of argumentation in and of itself is where the preciousness is, irrespective of the outcome that's reached through that process. I'm not sure if that makes sense, or is
that's very true for sure. And what you're talking about is a utilitarian deontological distinction that I use a lot of times in typing people. But what I want to say is, it occurs to me that the equivalent thing when TI users get offended or feel attacked is when we're told, or when I'm told, that because I want a given thing to be so, I'm biased in my reasoning or something. And I want to give an example of how it's like it's an attack on a TI user's character or something. So Delilah, I've always typed her as an ENTP, but and people have always said she's not an ENTP, she's an ENFP. Well, she's definitely not an ENFP, but the thing is, I think she's probably an ESTP. I've come to believe, I'm increasingly every day more convinced she's an ESTP. The thing is, everybody seems to insist that the reason I typed her as ENTP is because I was biased or because I wanted her to be ENTP. But that's offensive to me. Like, I never typed her for that reason to be ENTP. To the extent that I formerly typed her as ENTP, it was because I didn't understand how ESTPs could be smart. So, and Delilah's definitely smart. Her TI is rock solid. She's killing it in this logic class she's taken in college, and she's definitely a TI user. But the reality is she doesn't ideate very much. And when I try to think of instances of her really ideating, they're from when she was a little kid, and she's much more of a doer than me. So she's got a job and goes to school, and she likes to always be on the go. I don't. Her SI is shitty, but so is Taylor's. It's kind of like Taylor's, you know? So anyway, the point is, I'm objective about that shit. And the reason is because I don't have a very clear sense of my attachment to positions and ideas and stuff. I am willing to kick shit to the floor, you know? So that's the equivalent, I think, of a TI user going, you have to narrow yourself down and box yourself, and you have to defend this position as words, or else we nix it, in which case the FI user goes, then you're nixing part of me, and that's not okay. The TI user, in similarity, if the FI user goes, your reasoning isn't good because of how you feel, they feel offended about that.
But I would throw something into the mix, which is so with Source as an ENFP, his TI would be polar or his blind spot. But likewise with Eric as an ENTP, his FI would be polar or his blind spot. And I'm not sure if this will make sense or not, even though I think the ENTP, so Eric, may have an attachment to the process as opposed to the outcome of that process. I also feel that he might be blind to it, the attachment, his FI attachment to some of his argumentation. And I think that's what Source was sort of like keying into before. So I do believe that there's a sense of vulnerability in both types, but for different reasons. And I would also add that I think at sometimes I think NTs in general try and divorce themselves from the emotional attachment that they have towards their point of view or their position or their process, to say, hey, I'm doing this in a divorced manner. But truth be told, I think sort of like if you look at the underpinning motivations, sometimes, and not all the time, but quite frequently, there is a motivator there which actually is predicated upon their emotional attachment, which they can't divorce themselves from. And I've experienced it. Yeah, I've experienced it on many occasions on TwFP and elsewhere that sort of like pointing out that attachment and also that motivator, which may be behind the words or the argumentation, is a point of sensitivity, but also a point of resentment, not for it just being pointed out, but I get the sense that NT users actually are aware of in and of themselves that dynamic, and they resent it in and of themselves that there might be some attachment which doesn't allow them to be fully divorced or fully objective.
Yeah.
But
let's be fair, though. And
I'm sorry, let me just say one thing. The reason we don't like that is not because we disagree that we're motivated by our emotions, but we think that that isn't how you determine whether or not the arguments being made are okay or not. So you have to judge the arguments on their merits, no matter how much I'm attached to it. If it's the winning argument, it's the winning argument, period. My attachment's not relevant in calculating the outcome of the argument.
Yeah, which devalidates you if that seems to be proposed what the person's saying. Yeah, and that's completely understandable. And to be fair as well, from my point of view, is that there's significant insecurity on the ENFP side as well to be put into a TI arena where you just have no cope. You know what I mean? So there's significant insecurity in that. So it's not that one side is sort of understanding, that things are predicated on feeling or whatever, and that's just a thing that's wrong with the ENTP. It's not that just at all. Like from my side, there is significant insecurity in being able to properly formulate arguments and understand frameworks and things like that, and claims and all this sort of stuff. I try and all the rest of it, but I don't really want to go there particularly because it's just not an area I can play in, and I can't do the fast fire stuff. I need to really think, and it can just having someone sort of go in that mode with me anyway. I can kind of get quite anxious really, and just sort of just be quite put on the spot really, and I don't have, I've got the NE, but I don't have the TI to quick fire back and sort of, deal with what's being put out, and be able to kind of play that game basically. So often it happens in a situation like I was saying, like a few other people, like a few other NTs spoke up and were saying, even at one point somebody said like, oh, it seems like you're losing the wind from your sails, like you're mumbling, you can't speak, and they're saying that to me because they're perceiving that, and they're not realizing that they're kind of, what's happening there is that I'm quite anxious because I've got quite a lot of people all kind of shouting at me that I need to come up with some sort of, argument or something where that's not what I want to do. So at that point, rather than having to feel oppressed in any way, I just completely detach, and then I'll get a little bit, maybe I will get a little bit resentful because of it or whatever, and maybe point out like some sort of emotional attachment and because like it's sort of, and I'm not proud of that within myself, but like if you're going to put me on the back foot, like my 8 will maybe come up and maybe not too harshly, but say, well, all you guys are kind of poking fun at me right now, and that's how it feels anyway, but you guys don't even realize that there's this, look at your outbursts, look at the way you're acting, look at this, look at that, like, there's all these things that you're completely disregarding, and I will bring those things up because those are my only defense at that point.
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
bombarded at that point, and
Environments
it's my only defense.
environments that are insistent on the primacy of either TI or FI are environments in which the other one will have a great deal of discomfort. Like when I was getting divorced, there was this long period of time where my ex-wife wouldn't tell me what was going on. Really, she would say,
Mm.
well, we need to go to the therapist. We need to figure this out. Well, okay, are we working to save the relationship, or are we working to
Yeah,
end
yeah.
it peaceably? And she'd say, we're trying to figure out how we feel. And I was left in this
Mm.
period of time for several months, and it was the most torturous experience I've ever undergone. It was unbearable because I all I needed to know was the answer. Are we together forever? In other words, we're working out the difficulties between us. In which case, I'm swimming in one direction, or are we breaking up? In which case, I'm swimming the other direction. I need to know which direction I'm swimming. You won't tell me. We're supposed to figure out which direction we're swimming. I have no fucking idea. You tell me.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Eric, and also what
Yeah.
you said as well, Source. When I was listening into to both of you over the last few minutes, what I wrote down on this piece of paper near me is games, competition, I can't read my writing, power differentials, and rules of the game in particular. And then when Eric just mentioned his divorce stuff, it sort of like segued into that. It's as though sort of each is not just YouTube, but just generally TIFI. It's as though like this aspect of playing in different arenas and sort of what is hoped to be achieved by that. Specifically about the divorce thing, I think I've had a conversation before with Eric and also a couple of other people on TWFP to do with the frame. So having a cognitive frame which allows sort of like so let me start again. Having a cognitive frame of TI, which fixes a status, which then FE can operate in, versus with FI having FI ambiguity without sort of like a fixed held frame at the beginning or a fixed held status. I'm not sure how the T would like go into that, but I've noticed that quite often, and not just in conversation with Source, but elsewhere, that it's as though that maintenance of ambiguity is actually something which is preferential to large part, because when things become too explicit, when things are expressed too much or too on the nose or whatever it might be, it's as though there's some form of invalidation that happens with an FI user to a certain extent, because it's something which should be held within. To actually voice it, it means it becomes inauthentic, and therefore it loses its worth. And I think sort of like quite often with FE and FI users in relationship with one another, that there might be some head scratching going along based upon trying to establish where that value actually resides, whether it resides in the dyad or whether it resides in the monad of the dyad or whether it resides in each individual, and across the span of all three positions. And that's what I'm picking up in the interaction between Eric and Source, that it's a case of respecting one another, but also sort of like, where is that value, and how should it be broached, and where should it be held within the interaction and the relationship.
I
Do you have any
deduce,
thoughts on that?
I deduce that I'm attached to sauce more than to an average person because
Mm.
it bothers me when we have conflict. It doesn't normally bother me when I have conflict with most people because I just think, well, that's what they get for being wrong.
Mm.
So I deduce that my FI is at play in some regard there.
Mm.
But I
Mm.
think I mean, if I were to provide a reason for the attachment, it would be I feel like I learn a lot from Sauce.
Mm.
And I don't learn a lot from a lot of FI users. Sauce understands how to make me understand FI better.
Mm-hmm. And I would also throw into the mix with that it might all be the SI as well, and familiarity, and for both of you, this aspect of safety, and feeling safe in each other's presence to actually express authentically and to share what may be vulnerable to one another.
Yeah, possibly.
I don't feel the SI part of it really. Because there's lots of people that I'm familiar with that I have conflict with that I don't fret about the conflict later.
Hmm.
Mm. That's interesting to try and understand why there would be a difference.
Right. Well, I mean, I
Uh,
approach FI kind of deductively like that. So I can
mhm.
think of reasons why I like you. But when I think that, I think, well, but Eric, you pretty much like most everybody, unless they're unpleasant. So it's
Hmm.
like, okay, well, then why would you feel more concerned or like fretful when you fight with Sauce than with some other ENFP? Well, maybe these are the benefits. This is just like I can sort of go TE. Well, if I have to go down this weird question path, maybe TE. Maybe he's more useful.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's what polar FI ends up being. I don't. I have to deduce that I like you, that I'm
mm.
attached to you in some sense, right? And
Well,
then
if you learn more, like from someone, and you understand that, then it makes sense that you would be a bit more worried about possibly offending them to the point where you might not have further enlightening interactions with them. I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. So
but I
yeah,
don't think
I
that's
mean,
the
I
reason
approach
why I
things
like you
with
because I
with
don't
the
value
TE.
utility. I don't think that's why I like you though because I don't value utility. I
Yeah,
countervalue it.
yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, like when Opaloid said about maybe you're more comfortable in sharing stuff with each other. Like a lot of that for me is TE judgments of you, particularly, and who you are, your position, what you do, and how open you are in general about your own stuff, and just sort of a lot of kind of observations. I mean, the kind of, yeah, I suppose, put me in a comfortable place, like where if you were sitting there in a suit and a tie and had your hair slicked back and we're all sort of all of this, I mean, I wouldn't be kind of going down any of that route. I would be kind of probably on the defensive at that point. So a lot of that like stuff for me is TE observations, like
No, Sauce, you
where I get a
admire my
measure of someone.
professionalism. You'd admire my professionalism.
And I also admire your professionalism and your spiffy hat.
I figured it was time to get a little bit more professional in this video, and so I put this hat on.
Yeah,
just from the outside, just a few things I want to say. Um, I think it's been said, but I'll add something, and excuse me for putting words in people's mouths and stuff like that. But so I get the sense that Eric likes shoe sauce, and vice versa. I also hear a sense of remorse of there being a rupture or conflict or whatever that may have
sure.
harmed the relationship. But he's not actually saying sorry. But that's what I'm sort of like hearing, sort of like implied to a certain extent.
Yeah, I'm
I
not
get
saying
this.
I did not apologize.
Yeah, no, you didn't, but I don't think he would anyway, even if he was. Then I'm hearing from source as I can hear how the tone has changed, and it's as though sort of like there's a tenderness which has returned. The flightiness has been sort of like taken away to a certain extent because there's some reconciliation. But I want to put something out there, and I'm sorry if I'm putting words in your mouth, and if that's not the case for either of you. Yeah, I'm sure you can feedback and tell me if I'm wrong. But I want to put something out there to do with relational dynamics. So with Eric as an ENTP and having FI as his blind spot, so if we sort of like equate FI, and I'm sure this is quite simplistic, but if we equate FI to being related to attachment, it seems as though there's a blind or insipid or insidious aspect to the attachment that sort of like creeped up on Eric, and he's sort of like it's there, it's in his psyche, and it's like, oh, hang on a minute, I am actually attached, but why should I be? And it's as though it's something which is sort of like seeped in to the interaction, and now how he holds source uh, in deference, or not deference, sorry, that's the wrong word, but in relationship. And what's coming to me about that, and I don't know if this is going to get too personal or not, but please edit out if it is. but I wonder if it's to do with the any aspect, which both of you share, and the rewarding and attunement of the any developmentally. So here is somebody in source who is sharing the any, but at the same time, there's the good parenting to that blind FI, which is like in the child trickster position. And so source is coming along saying, yeah, I can any along with you, but at the same time, it's without the sharp edge of having to negate or invalidate. So if Eric was raised by a fellow ENTP or an NTP, if you imagine that they're both trying to negate each other's position, the NE, which is the lead function, would never actually have the possibility of just being respected, rewarded, and admired for what it is in and of itself. Whereas with Source, he gives that. So he's sharing in the NE and dancing along and playing along, but he's also giving the FI and saying, hey, it's all right to be authentic and use it in whatever capacity that you may use it, which may not have occurred.
So what it boils down to is, and I think
elsewhere.
it's right on the money, I think of him as a good parent to my FI, and I feel remorse because I wasn't a good parent to his TI.
Yeah, in effect, but it's also not just him being a good parent to the FI, but also
can I just add one thing, just to it for fairness, and the same thing happens. It's reciprocated. You know what I mean? Like I learn, you know, from Eric as well. Like I see it exactly that way, where you know we've got so many commonalities that it makes interaction easy and also fun and enjoyable and lighthearted and all the rest of it. But there's also kind of, I learn a lot from him, his FE ways and his TI ways, and like, you know, I learn, yeah, it's like, it is like that learning thing. And but the thing is about that, Eric, is that you don't have to worry about sort of offending me with that stuff or whatever, because really I don't know, I just accept, like, now and again you might get a bit hot-headed about something. It really doesn't bother me, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't like to be like shouted at. Like, I don't like to be kind of, you know, if it was in person, I would probably be like, dude, you need to sit the fuck down, like, not shout in my face. Like, that would bother me probably, but that's the only part of it that bothers me, you know what I mean? It's not like a reflection of a character thing or anything like that. It's just a discomfort in that level of raised voice and, you know, that kind of thing, you know what I mean? It's probably my own personal stuff, like, you know, I had quite a shouty step parent and stuff like that. I don't you know, I tend to just shut down and close off at that moment. So really that's like a personal thing for me that I don't like, and it's my own thing to get over anyway. But it doesn't like mar any aspect of relationship for me at all, and it is just something that I can see really that I have those things as well, where like I have to keep myself in check, and I try, and I don't always manage to do it, you know what I mean? So I see these other things in other people and I perfectly accept them, you know what I mean? Especially if I like them and, you know, I want to maintain some sort of relationship with them. So I'm completely kind of accepting of that, you know, but I will express, like, you know, this aspect of it I don't like, or this aspect of it. But if that is expressed, you know, there's always the undertone of, you know, if I didn't like you because of something you did anymore, you would know, you know what I mean? It's like, you would know, like, I would tell you, like, you fucking dick, you know. But it's not, you know.
It's funny because, like, I guess what happened with me and Nick on some level boils down to, I don't like the way he behaved to other people, and I guess I like him less now. I just thought, well, that relationship is on receive mode. Like, I'll answer is called, you know, I'll talk to him, whatever.
Before we move on, I just want to just throw something out there, because it's been quite emotionally heavy, emotionally laden stuff, and also tapping into sort of stuff to do with developmental paths and stuff like that. There was a moment where, Eric, you seemed quite sort of like emotional and upset and everything like that, and I just wanted to acknowledge that, you know, it was seen and felt and experienced on this side, and I'm sure Source picked up on it too. And with that, I wanted to say to Eric that, you know, you're safe, and there's no harm coming your way from either of us. And likewise, I wanted to say to Source that he himself is safe, because I can see how where the blind spots are in both of you, it taps into sort of like that child or trickster element. And it might be quite disconcerting as well, especially given, like, for example, what Source just said about growing up with shouty step parents and all that sort of stuff, and what Eric has also relayed about the good parenting. But I want to just put that in. Yeah, but I want to just put that in before the conversation moves on, because I think it's valuable to acknowledge that, and also to establish that.
But it makes
Because
me emotional when I, in general, feel like when I feel moisture in general, and then it's like having feelings at all is a little overwhelming because I don't generally attend to them at all. So uh, it's like as soon as the conversation shifted a little bit, my NE moved on to the next thing. So, whew, that was tiring. It's tiring.
Yeah,
I
it's
literally
tiring, it's draining. Yeah.
I literally need to go to sleep after I feel emotional. If I feel strong emotions for an extended period of time, like maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes, I'll need to go to sleep, take a nap. And it's
and that's
more
why.
powerful than Adderall too. So like I could be added up if somehow Kimberly and I have some sort of fight or we're on the ice and we're getting really emotional. It doesn't matter. It'll cut right through the Adderall. I have to go to sleep.
But I just want to put out, I didn't stop you or put a focus on it in order to expose or create harm or shame or anything like that.
Opaloid, but you stop with the disclaimers. Nobody does that.
No, I want to just I want to put something out there though that I thought it was important, because I think part and parcel of this conversation is, or a large underpinning part and parcel of it, is to do with validity of position and authenticity of self, be it from an NT or an NF temperament, be it from an ENTP or ENFP. And I think sort of like acknowledging and validating that root emotion behind stuff and saying, yeah, that's okay and it's valid and it's safe, I think is really, really important.
And it's the intersection of fairness and authenticity, which when they conjoin are what humanity ought to be.
Yeah, which is quite interesting because I wondered about what's my role in this dynamic, because I'm here sort of like playing mediator, facilitator, couples therapist, good parent, and various other different sort of
You
different
help
roles.
the FI and TI. You're the thing that encourages ideationally the conjoinment of validity and fairness to occur. So you're a conjoiner of sorts, and then additionally, TE people would be the realizer of, like, make it happen, right? So what we do around here is we do everything but the hard part.
I would actually disagree with that. I would say this sort of conversation, which is admirable that both of you can actually share, and hopefully this will be put online. I would say that this is the hard part, because this is the bit that people sort of like skip over and miss.
I would agree. Yeah.
So well done to both of you, and I'll give myself a pat on the back as well for facilitating the process.
Great job, Opaloid. All right, well, that seems like a good ending point to the video. Thank you to Sauce, thank you to Opaloid, and thank you to me for making this video.
Yeah, and before we sign off, I just want to say thanks for viewing. Please like, subscribe, comment. Visit Eric's store, which is TWF. He can tell you.
TwFPcollectibles.com, where you will see that there is you can purchase a typing session with me, or me and analyzing your personality in general. $60 is an hour-long session. However, I'll note this as well. We have a special $50 if you PayPal my PayPal address directly. Which, if you want to do that, add me as a friend on Facebook, and I'll shoot you the PayPal address, and then you can do that for $50. And the reason I'm saying it in this video, I'm going to start saying it more and more, is because I've had a couple people recently choose to do that, and everybody seems to have enjoyed it. I've had maybe 3 or 4 people total now over the history of the channel who paid me to do it, but recently it seems to be more interest in it. So Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to say, having and not for it to turn into too much of an advert, having been here on TWFP for about 8 weeks now, something like that, I've really enjoyed the company of the people who are here on TWFP. So I'd welcome and invite other people to actually come and check out the raw rooms, the forum. It's a good place to hang out. And also specifically about Eric, he's a good guy, and you're in good hands with regards all this stuff linked to MBTI.
If I can add something as well, I'd also agree. I came into talking with famous people quite, underdeveloped in the whole theory of MBTI, and as a NF type, I found it much easier to interact with people in the video chat setting. It just seems to kind of facilitate learning a lot better than just reading about the stuff online, and it really has expanded my horizon. Speaking with other people, sometimes there's a little bit of conflict, but that's part of life, and like getting over it and talking through it and learning and improving on those skills and how you can interact and talk with other people is definitely something that you can gain a lot of from coming on to talking with famous people and just getting involved in general in the whole thing.
Yeah, and I would like to just piggyback on what Source has just said and resonate with that. I came to TWFP with sort of like bits and bobs of understanding, which were quite conceptual, sort of like theoretical or whatever it might be. But actually experiencing different people, different types, taking the rough with the smooth as well. There's been elements of conflict, but overall it's been a hugely beneficial learning experience. So I would really recommend it to others, because the lived experience of interacting is far, far different from what you may read and hear and test yourself as when you start getting involved in the world of MBTI. On that note, I just want to say one last passing comment, which is, please share your feedback and your comments below. Tell us what you think, not just of this content, but also about the content of TWFP generally, and also the way that these interactions are working out. We're interested to hear about you and what you have to share. And I want to say that Eric may not say it directly, but he very much does want to know and is interested in you, the subscriber, and you, the viewer, to his output. So please do provide that. It's valued. And on that note, again, please like, share, subscribe, etc., etc. And thanks for viewing and listening to us all.
And don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.